Welcome to Latitude at Frontline. I'm Nirupama Subramanian. The last few weeks have seen an extraordinary turbulence in India's foreign policy, going back arguably to Operation Sindoor. First, the glaring absence of diplomatic support for India's military attack on Pakistan following the gruesome terrorist strike in Pahalgam. Then Trump's repeated claims of having brought the fighting to an end, brokered the fighting to an end. The failure of Indian and American negotiators to reach a trade deal, a 25% tariff imposed on Indian exports to the US, then another 25% for buying Russian oil. Trump's description of India's economy as dead, more invective from his aides, including his trade guru Peter Navarro. Not a single voice in the Trump administration to speak up for a relationship nurtured over 3 decades. A Modi, Putin, Xi Jinping photo op at Tianjin in China at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Trump declaring that the US have lost India to the deepest, darkest China and Russia. Suddenly, a day later, Trump declaring that India and US have a special relationship and there's nothing to worry about. Prime Minister Modi grasping the fragile olive branch immediately. Olive branch, really? To make sense of what is going on, I invited veteran diplomat Vivek Katju, who was India's ambassador to Afghanistan and Myanmar. He also headed the Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan desk at the Ministry of External Affairs and was Secretary West at the ministry. Welcome to Latitude, Mr. Katju.
Thank you very much, Nirupama.
It's really nice to have you with us. Let's begin with the present moment in India's foreign policy. What is it? Is there a similar moment that you can recall from the last 7 decades when India has felt so tossed and buffeted by the world's great powers as it is being right now between US and China?
I think in your introduction, you outlined the current milestones over the past 4 months or so extremely well. This has been an extraordinarily difficult period. We've passed through difficult periods earlier in our history since independence, diplomatically. Each one had its own characteristic. This particular period has been marked by Trump's truculent behavior, his erratic approaches towards India, some can say even his hostility that he has shown. And now the latest phase is the sudden U-turn that he took within almost, I think, 24 to 36 hours. He changed his tone totally. And he said something that he's been saying all through, that Modi is a friend of his, Prime Minister Modi is a friend of his, and that the India relationship is important, but that on this trade deal and on the Russian oil purchases, it's something that goes against American interests, and he will not tolerate it. And of course, as you so well put it, I think he's being very miffed that India did not acknowledge at all what the Americans were doing during Operation Sindoor. He believes that it was his mediation, quote unquote, that brought the hostilities to an end. We have a different take on it. I believe our take is correct, but who's to convince Trump? He said it over 30 times. So there it is. Now, clearly, there has been behind the scenes activity, and I would imagine fairly intense activity, which led to this U-turn from Trump. And Trump, as you know, is a person who doesn't mind U-turns. He revels in them, in fact. So there is this choreography that has been done. The only question in my mind is if this is a path that has been more or less settled, or whether we'll see another U-turn. And on that, I guess uh, you'll have to turn to astrology and not diplomacy uh, to find an answer.
Right. As you said, you probably need an astrologer to divine the future from now on. So, what I'm going to do, I want to zoom out a bit and talk about how we've got here. So, there was this high point of the Indian narrative about its foreign policy from 2014, strong, assertive India, not afraid of exercising its strategic autonomy. And then there was this year long, very breathless celebration of the G20 rotating presidency in India, which was also billed as India's greatest moment. And then there was all these claims in between of India having arrived and so on. Now, from there to this point, where India's foreign policy seems to be waiting for a kind word from Trump. Uh, policy. I would say to a point where the policy seems to be floundering. Would you agree with that assessment that India's foreign policy is floundering?
Before we come to the use of an adjective,
Yeah.
let me say this. There's no doubt that in the last 11 years, during the prime ministership of Mr. Modi, India has made economic progress. The Indian economy has done well. It's increased in size. It's the fifth largest at the moment. It's expected to be the fourth largest. And then, as the ruling dispensation's narrative asserts time and again, by the end of the decade, if not earlier, it will be the third largest. Now, this is fine. However, in the past, while asserting our progress, we were not reluctant to point to the gaps that exist. So I think there was a certain humility, there was a certain modesty, along with confidence that we were on the right path and moving ahead. And clearly, from the time we became independent, when there was a feudal order, when colonialism had ravaged the country, there has been steady progress. So there was always a consciousness in while making assertions that we were moving ahead, of the large gaps that existed, which needed to be addressed, and of the long road ahead still. Now, what I find that during the last 11 years, there has been practically no attention paid to the latter part. There's been this assertion that we've done this, but there has been nothing to indicate that while we might become the third largest, yet our per capita income still is low, which indicates that there is great poverty still in large parts of the country, and that needs to be addressed by us. Our GDP may be good, but the per capita income is still low. That in in some areas of human development in this field, we are behind even sub-Saharan Africa. And that the gap between the rich and the poor is increasing. So these are areas. In addition, I think we were always conscious that agriculture needed special attention. It had special problems and special attention, and that's obvious because you have 50% of the people who are dependent on agriculture, but it contributes just about 15% of the GDP. Dairy, yeah, it's we are the world's perhaps second largest producer of milk, but there are matters of faith which are involved when you import dairy products. And I refer to cow, what is the feed given to cow, the cattle whose milk or milk products made their
I believe it's
bone
bone meal.
meal. Exactly. So those are areas, and because we were always given we gave a holistic picture in the past of our situation. I think there was a greater appreciation when it came to matters relating to trade, when it came to matters relating to our development, our needs. So there was a recognition that the Indian market is growing, the middle class is growing, we're doing great as a tech power. That in science and technology in some areas we're making strides, but yet there was a recognition that India had special requirements. Now, the new narrative, uh, when it came to trade negotiations with the Americans, because it, uh, I think, acted as a kind of a difficulty, because there are reports that American officials were telling our negotiators that, look, you're going to be the third largest economy, so why can't you open up on agriculture? What's the hassle? And then they had to go about explaining. Uh, so I personally feel that this change in narrative uh, is, I, I, uh, I think, constitutes a departure from the past. But today, if you notice, the Prime Minister is saying very assertively that he'll never abandon, which is good, that he'll never abandon the interests of farmers, he'll never abandon the interests of the poor or of in dairy, etc. He will stick to his guns, and I'm sure he will. So that is one aspect which I think is important. And the second, and I'll be very quick, is that I've often wondered that with all our expertise, uh, how did it happen that we seem to be blindsided by Trump too?
Yeah.
Lastly, that did we explore language? Because after all, that's the test of diplomacy. Did we explore language which could have assuaged Trump's to a degree in his assertions that he mediated? Of course, we'll never accept mediation. It can't. We can't. And there are reports that this conversation in June between the Prime Minister and Trump was very difficult. So before that, could we have explored language that would have because we were in conversations with many powers, including the United States, and I wrote about all this recently. I said that these are questions that arise in one's mind, and so it's not only a question that, as the official narrative is, that we stood firm. Of course, we stood firm, and we should stand firm. But while standing firm, I think there's also need to explore these aspects of which are diplomatic in it.
So, when uh, just staying on this subject of the India has been claiming that it has the strategic autonomy and that nothing can stop it from exercising it. But at this point, it seems to me that India has options. India has uh, several options, but it seems that India does not have as much leverage, in exercising these options in any direction as it was earlier believed. In fact, these options look more like photo ops, and everybody seems to acknowledge that they are photo ops. So, are these the limits of strategic autonomy of a country that is still dependent on China for its own Make in India policies? For many elements in the supply chain.
Mhm.
So Make in China, I read a headline which was quite smart, really, which said for Make in India, Make in China has to come first, or something to that effect. So for tunnel boring machines, for APIs and medicines, for car parts, for lithium, for electronic vehicle batteries, all the rest of it, and then dependent on other countries, Russia, US, Israel, Europe, for weapons, and so and then a neighborhood in which your one of your rivals is actually in hand in glove with your arch enemy. So so what is the strategic autonomy then?
Look, let me try to give you a historical perspective, which I believe in, and I think many persons of my generation, as the civil servants and diplomats, and I dare say even people of the political class, fervently believe. Uh, Given the legacy of our freedom movement, we simply could not hand over decision making or the choices we made in foreign policy, in strategic policy, to any other power. We couldn't become a blind follower of any power, and I think that is the essence of strategic autonomy, that you make your own choices. Now, when you make choices, they are obviously made within constraints. The international order, the regional order, your own capacity uh, imposes those conditions. And the test of political leadership, diplomatic leadership, is how you navigate those conditions. And I believe that we were successful in navigating those conditions from the time of a person whose name is much reviled now, Jawaharlal Nehru, uh, then down to Indira Gandhi, and later. I do believe that Modi too has tried his best to navigate those conditions. The points that you have made are valid. He, I think, the story of our failure in modernizing our manufacturing sector is a tragic story. At a time when China became the factory of the world, uh, we went in the opposite direction. Fourth, we relied on the services sector, we relied on remittances, etc., and money started coming in, money that we needed. And for a variety of reasons, which I don't add, we just couldn't organize ourselves to make manufacturing easy, despite all the claims of successive governments that they were embarking on programs of ease of doing business in India. Today, the Prime Minister says Atmanirbhar Bharat, and that's a very laudable objective, except, as you have so well illustrated, the sectors and areas where we are dependent on for foreign uh, basic products. We call ourselves the pharmacy of the world, but 60% of the APIs, if not more, come from China. So how are you really the factory of the world? Now, there again, I believe China has become a scientific and technological power, and that is what's worrying the West greatly. Uh, we started very well. But when the digital age came, we started lagging behind. And today, in information technology, we've done well, but not as well as we should. I mean, that's the honest truth. How many patents do we have? How much money do we spend on R&D? How many mathematicians are we producing? I think these are hard questions that we have to ask us. You also said about the influence of China in South Asia. I think China clearly now perceives that the world is its oyster, and uh, Xi Jinping feels that China's in the same bracket as America. And China is on the rise, it's on the ascendant, and the Americans are in chaos. So South Asia is as much a territory for China to play in as any other area. And I don't think he's showing us any sensitivities. If you noticed, Wang Yi, 10 days before the Prime Minister was to travel uh, for the SCO meeting in China, Wang Yi undertook a 3-nation tour. He came to India for the special representatives meeting, and then he went to Afghanistan, where they had a trilateral, the Afghanistan, Pakistan, China trilateral, I think the 6th round, which didn't do too well. And then he went to Pakistan. And in Pakistan, after he had met Ishaq, the Pakistan foreign minister, they addressed a press conference. And the Chinese journalist asked him in that press conference that Pakistan is your final stop. And you had conversations in all these South Asian countries. Then he went on to ask his question. In his response, Wang Yi said something which interested me a great deal. And that is not on the website, incidentally, of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, which gives his answer. But if you see the video, it's there. He says, you said that it is, he told the journalist, you were right. This is the final stop and the most important stop. Which wasn't surprising, because Pakistan is Pakistan. But I think it was indicative of a certain insensitivity. So when you talk of China, my feeling is that what he was indicating, and the way the Chinese are behaving, is that India is a very large South Asian country, but it is just one more South Asian country.
Right.
And they don't believe that it's in their class.
Correct. So when India and China say that we should coexist as partners, not rivals, uh, China clearly means something else other than what India means by those words.
No, I think China doesn't want you to be a rival. It won't be in its interest.
Yeah, but when they say partners, it's not as
See,
equals.
that is the point.
Yeah.
They say, yeah, fine, partnership is okay. We don't want to treat you like we treat the Pakistanis, which is a client state. They'll do our bit. But you're a junior partner. That was my understanding. I'm no China expert, but little that I can see, that's the clear message to us. Notwithstanding all the drama that was there uh, in the SCO meeting, that can't mask this reality.
So one way to look at all this is that Trump 2.0 upended everything. But you alluded to this earlier in passing, but I want to take you back to that. Was there a failure in reading Trump correctly?
I think there was a shortcoming in, at least publicly, it seems like this. What there was in internal conversations, I do not know. But publicly, it seems that there was a shortcoming in distinguishing that Trump 2.0 will be a very different kettle of fish from Trump 1.0. And there should have been a realization that Trump 2.0 was a different kettle of fish. Why? He is arguably one of the most powerful American presidents in recent history. He won a clear majority, not only in the Electoral College, but in the overall vote in the 24 elections. He has both the houses of Congress under his control. He has a 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court.
Right.
And till now, in 2.0, while district judges, federal district judges and appeal court judges have opposed his policies, if you notice, the Supreme Court has more or less gone along and tick mark all the initiatives he's taken. Now, it's very interesting, this case of using emergency powers to impose tariffs, and including the tariff on India for purchase of Russian oil, is before the court. And we don't know what decision will be taken. Trump has said that he'll abide by the decision of the court. And if the court says that he doesn't have the authority, then of course it will be a relief to us, and perhaps it will be an escape route for him. But he is, if you see the plea that his people have made before the U.S. Supreme Court, it's very strong. They say that he has the power, and they say that it's necessary to end the war, and the war is not the Ukraine war, and it's not in U.S. interest.
I just want to also point out that over the last 10 years, we saw this great emphasis on personal relations between Prime Minister Modi and various world leaders, the chemistry between him and Trump, between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping. Is there a place for personal relations in diplomacy? I mean, I just want to ask a general question. Is it like, can diplomatic outcomes, positive diplomatic outcomes, be achieved through personal chemistry? Is there a special place?
In traditional diplomacy, diplomats are very reluctant to invoke personal chemistry of leaders unless there is certainty that a personal intervention would yield a favorable result. That was the traditional pattern of diplomacy, that you weighed your options very closely. And this was because of a realization that leaders, howsoever they may like each other, they are ultimately guided by their national interests. So a great deal of preparation went before the intervention of leaders was sought. And there was a realization that howsoever one leader may like another leader, yet there were constraints on what he could really do. And I believe that position still holds. So Trump, for example, says, Prime Minister Modi is a good man, he's my friend, etc. So in one breath he says that, and in the second breath he goes and imposes 50% tariff on you. So what does that show? It exactly proves the point that I was trying to make, that he says he distinguishes between personal friendship and what he perceives as the America's interest.
And the same with Xi Jinping, I should think.
But everyone. So I, for one, And I'll leave it at this one. I, for one, I'm always aware of the great limitations of personal diplomacy, and let me leave it at that.
I'd like to ask you how you see the appointment of the new US ambassador to Delhi, Sergio Gore, not just to Delhi, but he's also going to be envoy to Pakistan and to Central Asia. He is, I mean, the positive that India has taken from this is that he has Trump's ear, is very close to him, and therefore, there's something positive out of this. But how do you see this appointment on the whole?
I'll sum up what I wrote on the subject. The first point I made is that no one like Sergio Gore, who holds a very influential position in the White House. He's in charge of what the president's personnel office, so he's in charge of appointments, etc. And who's not a professional diplomat, would really like to leave the center of power. And the center of power in the United States is the White House. An ambassador, howsoever important the country may be, is always out in the cold. That's point one. Point two, it's clear from the articulation that Trump has made announcing his appointment that he likes Gore. And I would think that both for diplomatic reasons and for personal reasons, he's made him ambassador not only to India but for the region, for South Asia and Central Asia. Now, normally, when you send an ambassador to as important a country or as big a country as India, India is the most populous country in the world, its economy is big, its power is rising, even though it's certainly far removed in far terms from the big two, the US and China. I would imagine that the ambassador, even the American ambassador, would have very little time for any other work. So how would a man balance his role as a special envoy to such a vast region, spreading from South Asia to Central Asia, with his work as ambassador to India? Defies imagination.
So some people have seen in it probably an aspiration towards resolving the India-Pakistan problem. That maybe this is Sergio Gore's brief to see what he can do to bring President Trump, closer to the Nobel Prize by resolving this age-old conflict. No matter he can't stop the Israel war on Gaza, or he doesn't want to stop that. He can't stop Russia attacking Ukraine or stopping the war in Ukraine. Maybe this he thinks is doable, and Sergio Gore is an instrument in that plan.
I think within a week of his arrival, Sergio Gore will realize that he can make no headway in that venture, even if he's been given a task by Trump to attempt that venture. What you are saying essentially is resolving India-Pakistan issues. I think no government in India can ever look to a third party to intervene in Indo-Pakistan issues, especially such long-term ones as long-term issues as we have. It's a different situation when it comes to hostilities. You raised that issue in the opening when you said that no one supported us during Ops Sindoor. Now, Nirupama, my own take on this is this. When the Pahalgam attack took place, everyone condemned it, and I think many people contacted Mr. Modi telephonically to express their condolences. So there was great sympathy and realization that India was the victim of terrorism. However, when conflict breaks out, armed conflict between two nuclear powers, especially two nuclear neighbors like India and Pakistan, then the instinct of the international community moves from the causes of that conflict, which I believe lies in Pakistan's use of terror, to stopping the conflict. And in order to stop the conflict, they cannot take sides publicly. So no one then speaks out against one side or the other, because their main object is to try to cool down things, because if they're all worried that this conflict needs, that they're all worried about escalation of the conflict, and therefore their desire is to contain. Hence, there is no condemnation. That doesn't mean that they're not conscious that Pakistan has practiced terrorism against us for more than 3 decades. But it's just the way it operates, that you want the conflict to end.
The other thing I wanted to ask you very quickly is that, isn't Indian foreign policy weakened by not having bipartisanship? I mean, that is seriously missing these days. There doesn't seem to be a serious attempt to involve the opposition in foreign policy issues, whether it's China, what happened in Ladakh, or, there's no serious attempt to have a conversation, a national conversation about this. Does that lead to a weakening, you'd say, of foreign policy?
Look, I can tell you what happened in the past, that there was always a conversation going on between the government leaders and the principal opposition leaders, whether directly or through their trusted people. These were quiet conversations. They were never advertised, but they went on all the time. And because these leaders recognized that politics is politics and politics would be played, but when it came to serious national issues, then national interests demanded that they kept in touch and even consulted each other. I believe that all our political leaders are patriots, and that they followed these simple principles. Now, I don't doubt the patriotism of people who are at the helm in different, whether in the government or opposition, but I do feel deeply saddened at the ostensible lack of communication between them on these issues, on these very, very serious issues. I know the country is going through a deep ideological polarization, but despite that, I think our national interest demands a quiet dialogue between the top leaders of the country taking place. I don't think it's taking place, but if it is, and I'm wrong, then I'll be very happy to be wrong.
Just a last word on what is the way forward from here. I mean, we are in we are in a strange situation right now. How do we move forward?
I think we require a very nimble policy to navigate ourselves in this Trumpian world. We have major interests in the United States. We have interests in Russia. Uh, we have dependencies on China, but I do believe that, and we talked about it, that the Chinese have a certain view of India, and whatever they may say, that view is not going to change. Uh, now, therefore, what strategic autonomy means that we play the game in and pursue our interests in with a degree of flexibility where required, uh, independently, and keeping in mind that our ultimate priority has to be the alleviation of poverty. I know I'm using a very old-fashioned term, perhaps a term going back 50 years, a term going back to my youth, when we used to say the alleviation of poverty has to be our principal concern, and our foreign policy has to be dedicated to this aspect. Yes, all governments claim success where they are successful, but uh, in their articulation, in their narration, India, I believe, will not be diminished if we say that we've covered a long distance, but we still have a long distance to cover before we become developed. And the Prime Minister has laid out the object of Viksit Bharat, which is fine. But that itself presumes that there are still pockets of underdevelopment or which require attention. And we shouldn't be shy of saying that or articulating that. And once you do that, as we did in the past, I believe the path to negotiation on trade deals, on FTAs, etc., becomes smoother.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vivek Katju. Thank you for being on this program and for your time and for your very sharp insights. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Nirupama. It was a great honor to be on this podcast.